Welcome to the Bagel Logic Podcast, the show where Papa Tom spreads wisdom like a smear of cream cheese on an everything bagel. Here's your host, Thom Jennings.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Bagel Logic Podcast. This is, episode 20. I can't believe it. Somebody the other day said to me, I'm going to go back and listen to a couple of the old episodes. How many you got now? Like 3, 4? Like 18. So we're up to episode 20. And our second ever guest in the studio. First ever female guest in the studio. Not first ever female guest, but still. It's an important milestone.
I try.
So Crystal, I've always known you as Crystal Elliott, and now I have you in my phone as Crystal X Elliott. So what's the before I fully introduce you to our audience, what is your stage name now?
Well, we're still using Elliott until the divorce is final, and then hopefully shortly after it'll be Hartman. But I was not going back to Hackenberg.
Okay, so Hackenberg's your maiden name. So we'll just call you Crystal. How's that? But we'll introduce you as Crystal, and what's the future name?
Hartman. Well, as long as I can get him to put a ring on
it. Nick, if you are listening. Anyhow, we'll bring Nick up in a little bit. But Crystal and I, we've known each other for many years. And I tell you, the reason I asked you to be here today, and I always try to tell people that, because a lot of times you go, oh, will you be on my podcast? I go, well, why me? So I love reading your social media posts. You have a great story. You've been through a lot. I think that's kind of the thing that I really want to talk about today, because I can relate to a lot of the things that you've dealt with in terms of, they say the big things. What are the big ones? Death. You lost a sibling.
I lost a sibling.
Divorce.
Been through it.
Yeah.
As an adult, went through it as a child.
Yeah.
Parent abandonment. All the minor things, nothing big.
All the minor things. So, but those are difficult things to kind of go through and still keep, you have a big personality. And I think a lot of times people mistake big personalities for people that are just over it. Like they look at the things, they say, oh, well, that person, they've had things happen to them, but it's not a big deal because look at them. They're just so vibrant, so peppy. But I think sometimes that's, there's always something a little bit beneath the surface. So maybe we'll dig a little bit at that without being too therapeutic, but hopefully it'll help other people out there.
Absolutely. So
we'll begin with the first topic, I guess, is, your sister passing away. And that's one that I didn't know your sister. I believe we had met, but and I'm not really sure where, but I just had a feeling. I know when we were posting pictures of her when she was dealing with illness and everything. But there's a part of me that feels like I know her through you, because I think when you have an outward expression of grief when you lose a sibling, there
Absolutely.
are people that look at that and go, man, that's crazy. So where are you at right now in terms of the grief process? Because maybe you can just kind of give us a little backstory on how long ago she passed and sort of the emotions
absolutely.
you dealt with.
So I think even beyond the when she passed is when our parents separated back in 1997, I went with my mom and she went with my dad. And really for like 8 years, we didn't even talk to each other. And when we did, it was filled with vitriol and it was awful. And that was definitely a product of what our parents were kind of inputting into our head, both of our parents being guilty of gaslighting the other parent, gaslighting each one of us. And actually, one of the greater things besides Madeline that I can thank Tim for is he told me to start a relationship with Candace again. So I sent her an instant message on AIM, and she came to our old house, and immediately we just started spending a lot of time together. She lived with us when Madeline was born, so she was Madeline's nanny, and she was always a big girl, always. My mom used to say the story that she had an ear infection when she was an infant and then was never small again. But that's a story for another day. So she had made the decision to have gastric bypass surgery. Actually, she had what's called a duodenal switch because she was so obese. The surgery allows you to kind of gain a little bit more back and still have your stomach retain somewhat of a size so that you don't fail immediately. So immediately after her surgery, she just didn't do well. And at first I totally took it as she is my father's child and she is a terrible patient. I used to apologize whenever my dad was in the hospital. You know, I'm really sorry. He's the worst patient ever. I'll bring you cookies. I'm so sorry. And her boyfriend kind of wasn't taking care of her, so we moved her into our house, which was not the best place for her because it was she was in a second-story bedroom, and she just couldn't, she had no desire to eat and things like that. She had an abscess. It ruptured. It was the most disgusting experience of my life, driving to Rochester from Medina with that. And that was in July, and then from there, it went down. So that was July of 2018, and we lost her December 19th of 2018. So we're approaching year 4, actually. Madeline just asked me how many birthdays she's had without Aunt Cece the other day, and this is the 4th birthday she's had without her. So she ended up going into a catatonic state, and I think she just had given up at that point. And she came back to, and then started to get ill again, and they did a scan and found out that all of her bowels had necrotized. They were going to go in and do surgery if they could fix it. They were trying to talk to us about possibilities for a small bowel transplant, things like that. Come to find out they had to take everything out, and she would have never lived past that 48 hours. If she would have, I tell everyone, she didn't get fat by not loving food, and to tell her she can never eat or drink again, that would have done her in. So the kindest thing was for her to never wake up from that surgery. So we lost her on a Wednesday, and those last 2 days I could draw pictures of because it was so incredibly crazy. And she was really close to Madeline, and that was the hardest part. So,
and just to clarify, Madeline's your daughter.
Who just turned 13 yesterday. Yeah, so Madeline's my 13-year-old. And Aunt Cece was her world, and Madeline was Candace's world, without a doubt. So Madeline had a chorus concert that day. And so we did not tell her until afterwards. And I remember we went to Rudy's to eat after the concert, and one of the waitresses was like, "I'm so sorry for your loss," because they had seen it on social media that I had posted that Candace had passed and she was with my dad again. Well, Madeline said, "Is she talking about great-grandpa?" Because my grandpa, who was like a dad to me, had passed away in June. And I was like, "Oh, yeah." And then we got home and we had to tell her, and worst moment of my life. Yeah. Telling, because I was like, they weren't talking about Grandpa. Aunt Cece passed away. And I just remember her just screaming, "No, no, no." And I mean, in true me fashion, I do tend to try to be the eternal optimist, because I have had a lot of missteps and bumpy roads on my journey. So I try not to think about what could have been. Madeline and I were having a conversation the other day, and she goes, "Do you ever wonder what it would be like if Aunt Cece was still here?" And I said, I try not to, because we can't change it. So perseverating on what might have been is useless. It's the same thing with, what might have been if Tim and I had not separated. What might have been if I wouldn't have met Nick. There's always those things that you can think about, but they don't change the fact that this is the reality that you're living. I have good days and bad days. This year in general has just been a little bit harder because I'm an educator, and I'm feeling a lot of stress from kind of a lot of different angles. So I think I miss her in the way that I just wish I had somebody who on a Sunday would say, "Let's go for a drive," and we'd go eat and we'd do retail therapy and be able to sing, No Diggity by Blackstreet and then jump to, singing, AC/DC and playing guitars on the steering wheel like our dad taught us to do. So I miss those things. I grieve for what she misses now. I miss that she can't see how happy I am in my relationship. But she actually knew Nick. She went to school with him, and she didn't hate him, so that's a good thing, because Candace could be sassy, and she would tell you her eyes are black like her soul, and she was very different from me in so many ways, but then there were these pieces that were just exactly the same. So my status of where I am in the grief is really just kind of coping and remembering, but lately a lot of it has been trying to make sure that Madeline doesn't forget, because I know what it's like to lose somebody close. When I was in 7th grade, my grandma died in my arms, and I can remember her face, kind of, and I remember stories about her, but they are more fleeting. Every day they grow more fleeting. The same with my grandpa, who passed away when I was in high school. And Madeline said the other day, if it wasn't for the picture on the fridge, I would have forgot what Aunt Cece looked like. And so it's just making sure that we talk about her and that she lives with us and that she gets to experience these things, that she's always watching us when we're on stage, both Madeline and I, that she's there for all of the chorus concerts, and that she's there when we, laugh until we cry when we're around the house telling stupid dad jokes with Nick, things like that. So I just want to make sure that I honor her life and make sure that the memory of her kind of remains, but still make sure that I also honor the fact that I lost my sister, but I tell everyone at the end, she wasn't my sister. At the end, she was my child. I mean, we were essentially orphans. I haven't talked to my mother in, it'll be 15 years in August, or in December. I haven't seen her in 15 years in August, and she's not a good human being. And we just don't talk about her. And my dad passed away when Madeline was 5. And I took care of her. I mean, she lived with us. At the end, when she was sick, Tim would wake up and he's like, your sister's bellowing. And because she would need her bandage changed. And it was like having an infant. And it was like having an infant and a teenager all in one. I don't recommend it to anyone, especially when you're not a nurse. So those things, I think, are, I mourn her in more than one way. And I can't deny myself that. I have to be able to understand that it's okay to mourn her. It's okay to miss her. But I really try to not get caught up in the what could have beens, what should have beens, because it's such a bad hole to start to dig yourself into, because it's so hard to get out when you're in this dreamland of what could have been, when you're going to come out of it and there's not even a chance that they're going to be there waiting for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you touched on a lot of just things that I could definitely relate to, and I'm sure a lot of people can. Just the whole, I think of, my mother passing, and my mother passed around the same time, and we were very, very close. And I know you talk about not having a relationship with your mother. And again, just because somebody's blood relative doesn't mean that you have to have a relationship with them. My oldest son, or my middle son, does not talk to his mother, hasn't talked to her in probably a similar amount of time, 15 years. But I had a great relationship with my mother, and it was like any relationship. It was up and down, but it really, when she passed, it created a huge void.
Absolutely.
And, that void was filled. Now, I had a sister that I hadn't actually seen for, 25, 30 years. And now we're best of friends since my mother passed. And there was a part of me that thought that Mom, in her own way, knew that void would be there. And somehow that relationship with my sister rekindled. And then my granddaughter came along a year later. So, it's like, It's like you don't fill the hole, but it's almost like a bandage. And in some levels, as I've seen your relationship with Nick evolve, and Nick is your I guess
my partner, if I'm using grown-up terms. I'm going to be 37, so if you say boyfriend, it sounds so silly and adolescent, but he, my partner, the person I was always supposed to be with at some point in my life.
Yeah, people use terms like soulmate, all those other things. I mean, I'm very blessed that I have a great marriage, as you know, and I don't just say that. I don't have to. I mean, she's, she loves me, I love her, all that kind of stuff. We don't have to validate it in public or anything. But, it's nice to see you happy with somebody like Nick, even though, and I'll tell you what's really weird about this whole situation is that you and I have known each other for quite a while, and you've known Tracy, and Tracy, by the way, for anyone listening, is a huge Crystal fan. So I am
equally a big Tracy fan.
My wife's a huge Crystal fan, and so she's a big cheerleader and follows you on social media like I do. But we've never met Nick, and it's kind of weird. I feel like I know him already. He's like one of those people that's almost like a celebrity to me. That we've watched him on all these pictures and all that stuff. But But on some level, I mean, I'm going to be real candid with you right now, because that's the hope of this podcast, is that when I first saw you with Nick and knowing that you had gone through the divorce, there was a part of me that said, there's no way in hell this is going to work, because it seems like it's too much too soon. Mm-hmm. You lost a sister, you're going through a divorce, all that kind of stuff. Was there any of that nervousness in the back of your mind, in the sense that, oh my God, dude, this is a rebound thing, or this is my emotion, this is my grief that's going on?
So I think that's two-sided, because my ex's name is Tim, and Thom works with Tim, and Tim and I have a good relationship. We co-parent Madeline, and there are things that he does that I don't agree with, and things that I do that he doesn't agree with, and we kind of just live with it. But truthfully, our marriage dissolved back in 2017, right around our...
But one thing to clarify, your marriage likely dissolved in 2017 for people out there listening. In a public sense, it did not dissolve until many years later. And I think that's... And I can relate to that too, because when I'm previously divorced, especially when you have kids, you almost have to not let the world know what's going on with the marriage, because A, it's not good for the kids, and on some level, it's not good for you. But still, from my perception, it was like, dang, she's just getting out of this marriage. You know?
And actually, it wasn't even our child Madeline that kept us married in public. It was our other child, Brushstrokes,
yes.
Because we were business owners, and I mean, he had moved out of the house and kind of was back in the house a couple of times. I mean, he was living with us when Candace died in 2018, but shortly after that was no longer living with us. So it was about 2 years of kind of dealing with that. So yeah, from right around when Candace died, and it was actually the week of Valentine's Day of 2020 when I called him and I said, I think I'm done trying. Because for a long time I was trying, and I'm so glad that I stopped trying, because that was just me trying to fix things.
Yeah.
It was not, at that point, it was not the love of the marriage. It was the love of the idea of being married. I didn't want to be divorced because my parents had divorced. That makes me a failure. I didn't want to do these things. I wanted to make sure that my kid didn't have to go to somebody else's house on, every other Thursday in the weekends. And so I tried so hard to keep our marriage together because I was afraid of being a divorcee. And my friend Misty is actually who introduced me to Nick. And around February, she's like, I have this friend, Nick. I really want to introduce you to him. And at that point, she knew that Tim and I had been separated for a while, and I'm like, I don't think I'm ready yet. And it wasn't until July I went on Match, figured I'd spend enough money to get enough dates where I'd get like a steak dinner out of him. So I figured I needed to go on 3 dates. So it was like $120. I was like, I need to go on 3 good steak dinner dates in order to make this investment worth it. I was just planning on dating casually and met Nick 3 days later. And fortunately, he brings me home steak all the time, so I figure that makes it worth it. But I met him, and we started texting each other constantly. Like, we would wake up in the morning and send each other the first text, and we'd be up till all hours of the night texting each other. It was like being a teenager again. It was so funny. And Madeline was the best, because she would see my phone go off and she'd see me smile, and she's like, "Mom, is that the boy?" And I was like, "Yes." And I felt so juvenile. And within a week, I knew I was in love with him. And I worried that's quick, because I fall in love really quickly. I fall in hate very quickly. I do everything very quickly. I'm just an abrasive type person like that. Like, I'm all in, jump into the deep end, and, in ice cubes. And it was mutual. And he fell in love with me, and he fell in love with the idea of being in love with someone who had an 11-year-old, which was frightening, because I had heard nightmare stories of people dating with kids.
Yeah.
And the first time that he met Madeline, she came up to him and she's like, "Do you want to play tag?" And he's like, "Sure, let's go." And he went and played tag with silly string for probably 20, 30 minutes with Madeline and my bonus son, Ashton. And I just looked and I was like, could that be more perfect? It couldn't. There's no way it could be more perfect. And everything he is my balance right now when all of the other things seem to be out of control. He's definitely what focuses me and brings me down. He listens to me. He will play devil's advocate with me, but not in a malicious way, where I've had experiences in the past where, "Oh, I'm going to give you the other side of the story, and I just want you to think about it." But it's given to you in almost like a gaslight type way. And that's happened my whole life. My mother was notorious at that. So he came at earlier than I thought, but what was apparently the perfect time, because I clearly don't control the fates. So
yeah, it's a great story. And it's, but I would imagine, you definitely answered everything in terms of fear and trepidation and all that. And, like Tracy and I, when we first started dating, it was, after I was divorced and I had custody of the kids, which is a little unusual as a dad or whatever, but it was a deal breaker if they didn't get along with the kids. Now, Tracy and I actually got together, and my youngest son, he really rebelled, and he was a complete jerk to her. And so we wound up separating. I mean, I shouldn't say separate because we weren't married, but, we put our relationship on hold, or at least I did. She, I don't think, wanted to. And until the kids were old enough to accept it. And it was eventually Trevor that said we needed to get back together, because he realized, this is his exact words. He goes, "She's the only one that you've ever dated that didn't treat you like crap." And I think that it sounds like on some level, like your daughter, I mean, I know her casually, but she's very mature for her age. And I know all parents love to say, "Oh, my kid's so much more mature than everybody else." But trust me, folks, this is a young lady who's mature beyond her years, just a sweet kid. And I could imagine that would be a deal breaker if she said no. So it must have been very heartwarming and a huge validation for her to just be like, "Yeah, I'm okay with this." Because I don't care who your dad or mom is. When you're a certain age, they can't do any wrong, even if they are doing wrong,
Absolutely. And, when you were talking about your mom earlier, all I can think is that, I had this terrible relationship with my mom. And, I reflect a lot on Mother's Day, Madeline's birthday, right, and things like that. But I hope that I have that that one day Madeline talks about me in the way you talk about your mom. It's not perfect, but I remember one day we were shopping and she's like, "Mom, you're my best friend. Like, yeah, you spill the tea with me and you, spill the tea back. it's not just me spilling the tea. And I was like, I can't even deal with you. I love you so much.
Yeah, she will. I guarantee you. I have zero doubt in my mind, because ultimately it comes down to when kids are at a certain age, you just need to be invested in them. And where you could have really screwed it up is if you had gotten in this relationship with a guy and the guy became such a priority in your life that she felt that she wasn't a priority.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there was some pushback, as there always is. I'd push back from my kids, blah, blah, blah. But that's what it takes if you're going to be a parent. Just be present. Just, be there for the stupid stuff. I joke all the time. I said, you know what? When my youngest son started playing drums, it was hell, because it was the music was so awful. We'd have pictures falling off the wall. It was so annoying. But you know what? If the kid had a band concert, if he had a t-ball game, all crap that I don't like, no parent, I think, really likes to go to. Sorry, kids, if anybody's listening. But, you do it because, that's when it's important. You got to figure out a way to make it out. And if you are going to date, you got to... That's not to say, because it wouldn't be fair to Nick anymore. It'd be fair to Tracy, my wife, to say, "Oh, my kids are their priority, so the hell with your thoughts. It's if they don't like it, then they get." There's still that balance.
Absolutely. Because if you think about it, yes, they're always going to be our children, but right. Eventually, I really would prefer she doesn't live in our basement till she's 37. If she chooses to do so, that's fine. I highly doubt it.
Yeah.
But at some point, I was a young mom. I turned 24 shortly after she was born. I'm going to be 41 when she graduates high school. So that's a lot of life that I have left. And to not be able to have happiness or to be in a relationship because I'm constantly worried about that, that's scary. And then being able to find somebody who balances you and who balances your child. I think he's really good at, just talking to her. He's the phone. He has control of the cell phone. And, she has to ask if she needs more time on her phone. She's got to ask Nick for it. And she has to say why she needs it. Things like that. And we were talking the other night. And he's like, I just want to make sure that I'm doing a good job playing this part of being like a dad to her. And he never discredits that Tim's her dad. Right. They have different names. Tim is daddy and Nick is papa or Megalodad. He was Megalodad when we first started dating. She wanted to give him a name. She was immediately latched on to that idea of him because she saw how happy he made me. And we are very close. And she and I have a very unique bond. That's what happens when you open a business with your 6-year-old and you run a business with your 6-year-old and you spend all your time with her. So she is very mature. She ran a business for 5 years, for goodness sake. And she really wants the best for me. She'll be the first one to tell me that. And now that we're venturing into her dating, I'm glad she's got a good relationship model to kind of look after and see that it's important for somebody to treat you well and talk to you well and do kind things to you. And we're fortunate because her first boyfriend ticks all of those marks. It's really great.
Yeah.
Scary, but great.
It is scary. I'll tell you, Thom Jr., when he started dating, and he was, he's married to her now. He'd started dating her in high school and everything. But, that was my biggest fear, is that he had had a front row seat to a pretty horrific marriage. Although I will tell you, we did a really good job. The only thing that my ex-wife and I did together well, aside from making 2 great kids, was that we kept a lot of the stuff away from the kids for a while. Eventually when she started having affairs, she'd bring guys around and stuff. That's a whole nother layer of nonsense. But that's in some ways that was a little bit of a shock to the system to them. But the point being is that they saw some craziness going on. And my thought was, man, if they only see dysfunctional relationships, then that's the relationships that they'll get stuck into. You worry about that cycle. I'm not super religious, but I was taught in the Bible, the curse of 3 generations, if this parent is this, and you see it, alcoholic father, alcoholic son, abusive father, abusive son. And I was like, damn it, I just hope to God in some way, shape, or form, this kid makes it through all this okay. And my son, Thom Jr., is the greatest dad, husband, human being that I know on this planet. Not to discount my other kids, but, Thom went through a wife with brain cancer, he's young kids, and and through it all, he's still the same knucklehead who drinks too much sometimes and breaks things and all that other stuff. But I'm just so amazed that he's had a functional relationship. And you know what? I didn't have to do a whole of a lot to make that happen, but I think there had to be some point where he did understand the difference between a bad relationship and a good relationship. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I relate to your fear, but I also hear that optimism that's like, and I'm glad we're at the point we're at now and she's at the age where she's at. The divorce isn't a deal breaker, because a lot of people say, oh, kid of divorce. I used to hear that about my kids all the time. Like, oh, your kids are going to turn out to be juvenile delinquents because they were raised by a single dad, but they turned out to be pretty good. So
I can attest to that. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot to be said for being able to see a parent have the grit and perseverance to make it through a divorce and make sure that you're going. I'm a marching band mom, for goodness sake. Like, I go to all the booster meetings, things I would have never thought. I'm from Albion, so I never thought that I would be a Medina band booster mom. I love it. I'm so honored to have that role. I'm a theater mom. I joke with people that, we sold Brushstrokes, not because of the divorce and not because of COVID, but because our daughter turned into a 7th grader. And 7th graders are very busy human beings. Yeah. So we're busy every Saturday, so we can't be at Brushstrokes. So I have to be at a marching band show. And I'm so grateful that everything kind of fell into place when it did for Brushstrokes, because that allowed me to be the mom I always wanted to be. All of the kids in band, they call me Snack Mama. Although a few of them call me MILF, which, I think I'm a 4, so the fact that high schoolers think I'm a MILF is so exciting. But I'm Snack Mama. I'm that one that I'm like, do you need a sandwich? I'm bringing a whole loaf of bread. Let me make a sandwich. I'm making sandwiches in parking lots and in school buses, because I always wanted my mom to do stuff like that and not just like flirt with the 6th grade boys that didn't find me attractive, instead of what she did, which was flirt with 6th grade boys when I was not attractive. And so I want to be that mom that is there. We want to have the house that's the safe house where you can play board games. And, she had friends over yesterday. We were playing board games, and Nick and I were both playing games with them, playing truth or dare with them, and laughing. And none of them were uncomfortable. They liked that they could joke about it. Madeline's boyfriend was like, if you could be stuck with anyone for a month, who would you pick? And joking around, he said Nick. But we said that that's never going to die now, because he said so they can watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like the original, like early 90s ones, because Madeline was horrified when she watched the first one, which we were clearly insulted by, because that is classic cinematography right there. And so and
to be fair, no other series of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has come close to that first series. Even though they changed April in pretty much every movie, I forgave them for that, but they were amazing. But go ahead.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, like, I can't watch Halloween Town without being like, that's April O'Neil.
Yeah.
Because that's the way it is. And I'm glad that she feels safe to have those conversations with me, because I was lucky. I moved in with my best friend's family when I was in high school. Lucky Lori Lane, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So Lucky Lori Lane and Tom Lane took me in when I was in high school, and I will forever be indebted to them. They took me to school and dealt with my work schedules and play practice and doing activities, and they were so fantastic for me. And I say that I didn't have a great mom, but I had about 7 other mother figures that all gave me ideas for what I wanted to be when I was a mom. Whether it was, my friend Michelle's mom was the baker, and, Lori is she is my basket raffle soulmate. Like, there is not a basket raffle I don't want to go to. And, there were the friends' parents who were part of the theater program, and I was always grateful for them. And I get to be all of those people. So I don't have to say, oh, well, I had a terrible mom, so my life is terrible. I say, I had a terrible mom, and I had a really rough childhood, but I have the ability to make that better for my child. And that's the mindset I live on, while also being very aware that my mental health is super important. And I think that talking about mental health is incredibly important. I don't think we do it. Mm-hmm. There is this stigma around talking about people who have anxiety or depression, or OCD, things like that. And we don't understand that, if at any point we were to analyze everyone, I could probably give everyone some type of scientific diagnosis that's in the DSM-5. I won't, but some of us, I do a pretty good job living every day, but I do that because I go to therapy and I take my meds and I make sure to take baths, and I'm the most introverted extrovert you'll ever meet. I'll spend 2 hours in the bath listening to an audiobook just so that I can recoup from a rough day at school.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on mental health issues. I mean, that's really the impetus for this podcast, was just the fact that there's so many conversations that people are really afraid to have. And I've always found that, when it comes to things like cancer that are just they're very easy to kind of wrap your mind around and say, oh, well, this is cancer, so it's a disease, and, blah, blah, blah. And as much as people can say, oh, you got lung cancer because you smoked, or this, that, or the other thing, there's not the stigma where it's like I said, oh, you're depressed. Oh, well, you must be weak, get over it. I mean, you shouldn't be depressed. Just move on. And then also, I think with depression, particularly, which I've suffered, horrible bouts of depression, even through the COVID thing, was very difficult for a lot of us who face those types of things. A lot of times, if you have that public persona of, oh, this is a guy who runs his mouth all the time, and he's Mr. Gregarious, and he's always telling jokes and dad jokes, or playing music, or making bagels, or doing everything. Well, how the hell is he depressed? I mean, he looks like he's fine. So what is this, some kind of, ploy for attention or whatever? But as you said, it's a very real thing, and it kind of sucks that people don't understand that, and also understand the genetic components of it, because it sounds like obviously you were dealing with some mental health issues in your family. And and ultimately, we touched on before, breaking that cycle, that whether you believe that in the Bible or whatever. My sister has said to me at one point, I don't get why you're such a good dad, because, our dad just wasn't like that. And my dad had serious mental health issues, like beyond anything I could even describe in a short podcast. But on some level, it created a sense of awareness for me to avoid the pitfalls that kind of drove him into the ground. And in many ways, it could have happened to you, because like my dad, he had lost a job. His mother died. My mother got sick. I mean, he had a whole bunch of things that came at once, and it just all crashed, and he tried to kill himself, and he never recovered from that. And this stuff can eat you alive. But again, it's because if you don't accept the fact that tragedies befall people, they need somebody to listen to them, they need support. You're just not, I try not to swear on the show. You're not just some pussy who can't handle everyday life, man. Life is hard, get over it.
Oh, we live in Western New York, and the sun doesn't shine here for 6 months. Oh, I get it. I need more vitamin D.
Right.
Totally aware. But you're absolutely right. And it's funny, the way that you describe yourself is essentially the way I just describe myself, gregarious and always making jokes and things like that. I'm the children's book reader at Brushstrokes. I'm the one that is on stage and I'm acting. Well, sometimes I'm going to school and I am acting, and I'm trying to make it through a day where I didn't sleep the night before because, I lay in bed and I get the scratchies when I'm super anxious before bed or things like that. And it's okay to be sad. And I feel like, at least the household I was raised in, is that you're not allowed to be sad. And when you're sad, it's because there were plates flying at the walls or something like that. So, and I think that they're slowly starting to make that turn with like addiction and understanding that addiction is a disease. And I try to think about it from that perspective. Like, both of my parents were addicts, and Candace was addicted to food. And I think that my addiction is trying to find a way to advocate for myself, whether it's having a happy home, or whether it's being happy in my career, or whether it's laughing with friends or singing karaoke or being on stage. I get addicted to that. Don't get me wrong. I'm also addicted to cereal. I mean...
Cereal the podcast or cereal the food?
Cereal the food.
Oh, I was addicted to cereal the podcast, but I like cereal the food.
I love cereal the food. But, I am a binge eater. Things like that are definitely reminiscent of my parents' mental health issues that were never addressed. Like, my dad had major depression and anxiety issues. I'm pretty sure my mother's bipolar, and I'm pretty sure that her mother was. Try being a mom knowing that you are a third-generation mental health issue and then living in isolation for 2 years, #thanks COVID. And I definitely have PTSD from COVID. The highlight of my COVID was the, 4 or 5 months that the wonderful community of Western New York supported Brushstrokes, and we were doing Brushstrokes to go. And I would make deliveries from Scottsville to Grand Island, and just being able to see people waving was like bringing me in. Well, you don't tell someone who is occasionally an introvert but is always an extrovert, hey, you got to stay inside and just be with your kid. I think that we don't acknowledge enough that we're not even out of this yet. We've been free from wearing masks at school for a month, and it was part of our lives for 2 years. We need time to grieve what we lost, and we need time to rebuild ourselves. And that's why I get so sad when everyone is so angry and miserable. I mean, I get it. I hate gas prices right now. I hate that, we're still having, vaccination debates. I support you no matter what you do. But come on, like, why can't we have that really wonderful, like, first 2-3 months of COVID kindness come back? Because I feel like there's just so much hatred and vitriol lately. And that's hard to see. So that's why when I am on social media, even when I'm being honest about my mental health, I'm still trying to find positives. Not that there aren't negatives, because I'll point out my negatives, but I want it to be a true vision and just try to, like, spread some kindness, man. We need, that's what I think also hurts a lot of us, is that we're still, I think so many of us are going through PTSD from COVID.
Yeah, and PTSD, I mean, I've experienced it a couple of times in my life, and it's not a great place to be, and it never really goes. Once you've had it, it's not hard to re-traumatize, and I mean, you've gone through it. I mean, the situation with your sister clearly caused a large degree of PTSD. Divorces cause PTSD. Those things happen. I mean, what I've found that is important is that it really, in terms of mental health, whether it's any mental health condition, it's crucial that you surround yourself with the people that are able to understand it and maybe don't necessarily deal with the same things. Like in my case with my wife, for example, Tracy doesn't really understand what's going on in my brain 97% of the time, but she doesn't really question it or give me crap about it or whatever. So if I need some space, she's able to kind of give me that space. But there really is always that opportunity for, I don't even know the term, I guess predator on some level. I mean, predator sounds like everybody thinks, oh, predator, child molester, blah, blah, blah. But I think that there are predators on a very low level that still just in your daily life, I mean, it could be the person that waits on you at the convenience store, right? And and you become so much more susceptible to that. And on some level, you bring those people into your life because they just smell that mental health issue that you have, and they just thoroughly take advantage of it. And, the refreshing thing about my marriage to Tracy is that I finally found somebody who doesn't take advantage of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was the biggest hurdle that I had to overcome. And I still have that in personal relationships, that they tend to be short term. I tend to get out of them quicker than I used to. But I still deal with that on a regular basis, where you bring people into your life and you think, they're all wonderful and everything's going to go well for you and everything. And for some reason, they're just like, man, I smell something on Crystal, or I smell something on Tom. We're gonna take them for a little bit of a journey on, my little control freak parade or whatever. But
want to see how well I can gaslight you, little boy? Yeah, absolutely. And you're never going to be able to escape that. And it's super unfortunate.
It's horrible. It's a horrible way to live some days. I mean, it's, when you're in it, when you're in that moment, it's horrible. Like, I think people that there's hopefully people out there that understand what we're saying. I mean, when you're in that moment and you've come to that, I used to call it the come to Jesus moment, where you realize that this person that you've called a close friend or a business associate or anything is just some scumbag.
Toxic.
It's horrible. Like you feel, I feel when I have a relationship that fails, a friendship or any relationship, even my divorce, I blame myself. I very rarely blame the other person. It takes a long time for me to get to the point where I go, well, it's them. They're the ones that are fault.
I'm a fixer. Yeah. I take those people that say, ooh, I smell grief on you, and I'm going to exploit it. I see those people and I'm like, I can make you better. I can shower you with kindness. Like, let's live every day like it's, random act of kindness day. And there have been so many relationships I've had where so long I keep giving and giving and giving. And I'm like, but I don't understand.
Right.
Like, why are you? Because I want to fix. Like, my therapist will be the first person to tell you, besides HIPAA, and she can't, that I am such a people pleaser that it negatively impacts my ability to see when I have that toxic person or people in my life and be able to step away from them. I have to tell you, the best thing that's happened to me is also the worst. So my longest relationship ever has been with Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, and I was hacked. I was hacked back in December, and I waited for like 3 weeks hoping they would unlock my account. I mean, I have 17 years worth of pictures on there that I lost, videos that I lost. Heartbreaking relationship end, by the way. But I had to set up a new Facebook account, and I didn't have to be everyone's friend. I'm still not good at not caring what other people think about me. I don't know that I'll ever get to that point. I know there's so many people that are like, you just have to stop giving crap about what people think about you.
But that's who you are. Right?
I can't do that. Like, I envy you. I envy you more than I envy people who can get up in the morning without hitting the snooze button 17 times like me. But I can't do that. I do worry about what other people think about me. And I want what they think about me to be positive. I really want to be that person that, they're like, oh, she's so funny, or she's so kind, or do you remember this time that she did this or that for me? That's who I want to be. I don't want to be like, oh, she's the one I heard was talking smack about somebody else, blah, blah, blah. Because I hate when I'm on the other side of that. I've hated it since high school. I still have, like, PTSD from when I was elected president of the National Honor Society in high school. And one of the kids who was popular was in the back saying, oh my God, I can't believe she got it. And I was mortified. And I graduated high school in 2003. So 20 years ago that happened, and it still eats at me because I want people to think positive things about me. Which is funny that I'm so candid with the things that are wrong with me and my mental health issues, because you would think, oh, well, you don't want people to know that, you cry yourself to sleep some nights.
That's I think that's part of the important part of that is that's showing other people that they're not alone, because there's nothing, you and I at some level have the advantage of being able to express ourselves really well. But the people I worry about the most are the ones that can't, the ones that are very quiet. They're the ones that are really subject to some severe abuse. I mean, you've taught in schools. I mean, you've seen it happen to young children whose parents are just, horrible, horrific people that are abusing them, and these kids just don't have a voice. And if people don't think that they have a voice, or they think that there's something wrong with them because they're, they cry themselves to sleep, that's part of the problem. It's even like with this whole trans thing right now. I mean, everybody, I'm not, I mentioned on a previous episode of this podcast, like, I don't really have huge feelings about trans people. Like, I'm not going to go out to a rally or anything, but I'm certainly not going to beat up on them. Like, I get it. Sometimes it's really difficult to share a portion of your being that the rest of society looks at as a weakness or a defect. We need to be able to embrace those things and accept them to the point where, again, you can accept without agreeing.
Absolutely. I mean, when you I've been fortunate in that I happen to live with the most wonderful human being in the world when it comes to rallying for people who don't have enough people to rally behind them. And, Madeline has a friend that has multiple friends that use they, them pronouns. And I've experienced it in school. I had a conversation once with a student where I had heard that the student was using she pronouns and had not said anything to us as staff yet. And I said, please let me know if at any point you would like me to start using a different pronoun, because I want to make sure to honor who you are. Now, pronouns don't really matter a whole lot in room 4 because everyone is darling, dear, honey. Or I give them old men names. Like, we've got Frank and Henry, and I just give them funny names. So pronouns don't come in. I don't use them a lot because that's my surefire way of avoiding hurting somebody's feelings or making sure that I'm not honoring somebody. But I think that to just use somebody's dead name when you know what they're preferring to be called now, I think that's just heinous personally, because it's not hurting you to use one name versus the other. Like, if you said, I just love him so much, so please call me Todd from now on. I know how much you love Todd Rundgren. Mm-hmm. So if you asked me to call you Todd, I'm going to call you Todd. I'm going to say it's a little strange. Maybe you're going a little far, but I'm not going to say that to your face. I'm just going to think it. But I'm going to be like, hey, Todd, how are you doing? And it doesn't hurt me to call you a different name. So why should it hurt somebody else to do that? Like, it hurts more when you refuse to do it and then you say malicious things. That's just awful. Don't be terrible humans. Like, just be good humans.
Yeah, such a little effort. Yeah, it's funny, the Todd thing. That's pretty funny. But,
you are sitting right in front of posters.
Yeah. So. I got like 1,000 Todd Rundgren posters. So you're the second person that's been in here smelling. My granddaughter came in here. She says, "There's Todd Rundgren everywhere, Papa." I'm like, I have raised you as a grandchild well. So that will literally be a whole episode on my obsession of Todd Rundgren music. But
I think that Al should facilitate that podcast, obviously.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we got to wrap up, and man, I say this from my heart. I love you, Crystal. I'm so happy to see that you and Nick are doing well. It's a great story. I am an officiant. Should you guys get married? I don't know, I'll probably be busy that night, but you can at least ask me.
Well, I would like you to come, but
I will definitely be there. We'll figure it out.
Because I already have Misty.
Tracy will force me. She'll be like, as I said, Tracy is the number one member of the Crystal fan club. So,
I love it.
I'm a member as well, but I only have so much love, and I've given most of that to Todd Rundgren, as you mentioned. But again, just and your daughter, you've just done a great job with her. She's such a sweet kid. I can't wait to see what she becomes. I feel like she's going to wind up being some kind of executive. Hopefully, I think she's going to be Elizabeth Holmes without the criminal record. Maybe she'll actually she'll like say she's going to do something, actually do it, and become a billionaire. And everybody will like, no way. Be like, yeah, no, I actually did it. So.
Oh, I hope so. That way we can live some cush life and.
Absolutely, man. Throw me some cash too, by the way. Sponsor the podcast.
Whatever
you plant that in Madeline's
the Madeline
brain
Elliott
right now.
Foundation.
Yeah.
You got it.
The Madeline Elliott Foundation for lowly podcasters.
Well, thank you for having me, Tom.
All right, and great. And everybody out there, thanks for listening. Said the podcast has been growing really well. We've had some fantastic guests, and I promise to have you back on in about 6 months or something, and we'll catch back up on things. And as your T-shirt says today, a wise woman once said, "Oh, there's an F word in it. F this S," and she lived happily ever after. So on that note, thanks for listening to the Bagel Podcast. This is your host, Thom Jennings. We'll see you next time.